the other database objects and how we can create them, how we can manage them. So therefore, we want to have a look at how this works. So again, we can create and manage them using both the interface and also SQL commands. If we want to use the interface, we remember that under worksheets, when we, for example, use this worksheet, and then we navigate from this worksheet section into databases, we can see that here we can, for example, expand the Snowflake sample database, and here we have the schemas. So the schemas are just a logical container, basically, for our objects, our database objects. And here, for example, we see we only have tables, but we can have additional database objects like schemas, stages, and many more that we will, of course, later on discuss in a bit more detail. So if we want to manage this using the interface, we can, of course, we can write the code here in this editor as well to create tables and so on, and alter them and so on, but we can also see and manage them using the interface. So to do this, we just navigate to this data section, and in here under databases, we can see again the overview over the existing databases. Of course, we should select the role that has access to those databases. In our case, to see everything, let's just select the account admin. And in here, we can now also create a new database. Of course, we can also dive into an existing one. So we see here the schema and then the tables. We can select them. And then we see here, these are the details. We have like the privileges. Then we have here the column names. And we can also see a preview of the data. This is using a warehouse because here we need to run a query. So here we can just see this in a little bit more of an easy way, more interactively. And also what we can do is we can use, if we just go back to the overview of databases, we can also click here to see the details and then navigate to the schemas and see what we have available in here. So this can also be done. If I want to go back to this one, I can always click here on the databases up here. And here, for example, again, we can dive into the schemas and here then again into the objects. So in this case, we only have tables, so we can see those tables here. And if we select them, we can also get a preview of the data. What we want to do here is we want to create a new database, and then in this database, a new schema. And then from there, a table that we have created. Okay, to do this, we just navigate back to the overview of all of the databases. And then in here, we can now click on plus database. So here we can give it a name. For example, we can say this is something like first DB. We can give it a comment. For example, this is our first database. This is just to understand what is this database about. It is optional, but we can create it like this, and then it will be created from here. So you can see even by this icon that this is a standard database, and this one is just a share. So this is more of a system database, and this is a normal shared database. And we talk about those shares later on in the course. This is not so important for us now. So here we have a normal database that we have created. We can select it, and in here we can see the privileges, so the details. And again, we also talk about the privileges and the roles later on in more detail. So we don't need to understand everything from now, but here we could also now already add additional privileges. This means that we can select a role where we want to grant those privileges to. For example, we want to grant it to the public, or let's say the security admin, and then it will be also inherited to throughout the hierarchy of the roles. And we talk about this hierarchy later on. So the lowest level is the public. So when we have the security admin, it will be also inherited to the next level. So account level will always have access to everything. Even if we granted to the public role, account admin will always then also have access. So this will always be the top level role. And if we, for example, just to demonstrate this, grant the privilege to the security admin, of course, the public role, which is at the bottom, will not have access. So here you can see we can just have all kinds of different privileges. For example, create schema. So if I do this, maybe I want to do this to, let's say, the user admin. So I grant create schema, and I can also check the grant option, which would mean that then this user admin can also grant the privilege further to other roles. So in our case, we don't need to check it. We can say just grant privileges, and then we see it is available in here. And now if we use the role user admin, which per default would not be able to create a schema, we could do that also using this role. So you can see if I use the public role, I cannot even see this. So yeah, here you see there are many privileges necessary. And if I have actually the role user admin, probably it also won't work because yeah, in this case, I can see that I can now using this role also create a schema. In our case, let's again just switch back to the account admin. And in here, we can now create a schema. So to do this, we can say we create a schema. And here we say this is first schema, for example. And we can say we want to manage access. So this is create schema. And then we can say we want to create this. Okay, so now that we have this set up, we can go into the worksheets and we can also see that this is now available. And from within this schema, we can of course now also select this, and here we can create now our database objects. And again, don't worry, we talk about those different things like streams, pipes, file formats, stages, and so on later on in this course. But here we could say we create a table, we could create it from an existing query, so then the data in this table would be just the output of an existing select query, or we can just create it as an empty table. So if we do this, basically we open this in a worksheet. So you see under the hood, there's always the SQL at play. And in here, we could also say we want to open it directly in the worksheets. So we can work from within here. And here I could say, this is our first table. And then we can specify the column names. So for example, we say this is the, let's say, first column. And note that you never use ideally the white spaces in the database objects. So here, if I would want to do it, I could do it. Then I would have to use these quotes, but usually we just use something like an underscore. So we say first table, and here the type. So this is maybe an integer, and let's say this is first column. So let's call it like this. And then we could create another column. So we could say comma, and then we have the second column. So second column. And let's say this is just something like text, very basic. Yeah, here we don't need to be very specific. And we could also comment this out. So we remove those two dashes, and then we could add a comment. So we say this is our first table, and then again we create this using the account admin. So per default, the account admin will be then the owner because we created. And then we have full privileges on this object because we have created this object. Okay, so if I execute it like this, I can see it is now available. And if I now run something like select star from this table, first table, we can use autocomplete, and then I just select this command, I execute it, I can see, I can run the query, I can see those columns, but there is currently no data, okay? So, of course, this was an overview and this was already a lot, so hope this gave you the first impression of how we can use the interface, how we can create tables and schemas, and of course, now step by step, we want